Hi, my name is Carlo Volpe,
And I'm Desmond Silva,
and
and
welcome to
welcome to
Centerville
Centerville
Voice.
Voice.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Centerville Voice. Again, my name is Carlo, and this is my good friend Desmond. What's up, Des?
How much about you, Carlo?
I'm doing great, my friend. And welcome everybody back to Centerville Voice, episode number 7. And again, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for viewing, everybody. Thanks for your likes. Thanks for your shares. Don't forget to hit the like. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. Hit the notifications bell as well, so you'll know all the time. Every time we have a new video, you'll get notified. So tonight, Des, we're going to talk about C-10, if I can say that
Yes.
right. Bill C-10.
In Canada, the federal Canadian Bill C-10, that is.
Exactly. Federal Bill C-10 in the Canadian Parliament right now. It's causing a lot of waves right now. It's causing a lot of people. A lot of people are kind of confused. A lot of questions about it, and let's get into it, right? So, if I can do a quick overview on it, basically, what the bill is trying to do is that and I'm reading this right from the government website, is that Bill C-10 amends the Broadcasting Act, right? So it's the act that basically controls and governs how everything is broadcast in Canada: radio, television, the content, the how it's broadcast, and the licensing. Those are the two main things. And what this act is doing, or the bill is trying to do, is really just change it. And we're going to get into how it changed it now. But I want to get into a little bit about the history of it, because before the show we were talking a little bit about that. So let's get into that, Des.
Yeah, so like back in the 60s, so back when we can remember. I remember this well because it was around the time that the Toronto Maple Leafs were actually winning the Stanley Cup. So that's how far back it is. So yeah, it was the Canadian government took issue with the fact that there was a lot of American shows and a lot of American content coming over and being displayed on Canadian televisions. And so they wanted to make sure that there was some level of Canadian content being showed to Canadians. Gotcha. So what they did was they tried to make a law where there was a mandatory amount of Canadian content that was displayed on television. Okay, television and radio, primarily television, because that was what we're hearing the most. Not rather than on the radio, it was mostly all Canadian. That was very local stuff on the radio. But I still remember there was actually a character back then, again, referring to the Maple Leafs, where they showed, okay, we got it, where they have the Leafs against some American team. Yep. And it says, okay, we got to get our 10 minutes or whatever number of minutes of Canadian content. And so what they do is they pan the camera over and aim it at the goalie, and the goalie is just there resting like this.
You got their 10 minutes worth.
Well, goalie's been a lot more busier in recent years. So yeah, but anyways, so now we've got it so that, and they had I remember people were still back then were still trying to usurp this type of legislation. But there was a device called the Canadian that was called in Canada was called the Death Star, because it was essentially killing Canadian television. With all US programming, and you could get this and you could hook it up in your home and you can get American broadcasting coming to your Canadian television over the air, right?
Okay. So the intention was not to cut you off, but the intention was to regulate, to control the content, to ensure Canadian content was just at least survived. I mean, who knows the real intention?
Pretty much. It's just it was basically so that Canadian shows could actually have a chance. You know what I mean? So that they would actually get ratings, and then they would actually be able to keep the shows going.
Okay.
So otherwise, you'd end up with Canadian TV would eventually die out, is what they were thinking.
Hearings began today into the very future of Canadian television. The CRTC, the body that regulates television in this country, will look at many issues such as who can broadcast, what they can and should offer, and at how much it will cost you and me. But the topic right now that is hot is definitely technology. TV is about to change, and quickly. And if you think there are a lot of channels to choose from now, well, just listen to this report from the CBC's Bill Casey.
high-powered, direct-to-home broadcast television.
It's just an artist's conception now, but within a year it will be real. A new kind of United States TV satellite floating up with the stars and beaming hundreds of channels directly into homes across Canada.
Sky One, the entertainment channel.
There'll be programs like these already available on a satellite service in Europe today, as well as up to 50 pay-per-view movie channels.
Oh, fabulous! Sky Soccer.
For those of you who aren't aware of the competition,
This is what it looks like. At a recent preview in Toronto, Rogers Cable displayed this 18-inch disc that will pull in all those satellite TV pictures, giving consumers more control over what they view and perhaps giving the cable companies more competition than they can handle. Cable industry wants the CRTC to let it increase its fees over the coming years so it too can compete head-on with the so-called Death Star. So it too can supply the digital decoders that let the viewer give orders to the TV set.
I think the real risk is that we look here for a technological fix.
Private broadcasters claim the system doesn't need more black boxes, but more money for Canadian programming. However, a former CRTC chairman now associated with a pay TV channel says it will be the Canadian television industry that will suffer if viewers leave cable for the new satellite services.
And if that happens, it won't be Canadian programs that will come from these US satellites. And so our programs will not have the funding that they require.
No matter what happens in the future, Canadians will have more TV choices, and they'll certainly pay more for them. The question is, who'll get most of that new money?
That's what the intent was back then. Now what's happening is now that fewer people are watching television and more people are watching stuff on the internet.
All internet now.
And the internet's no longer under any type of regulation from the CRTC or any type of governing body,
right.
at least
Again,
on the
the
Canadian
CRTC is the
side.
Canadian Radio and Television Commission, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And they want to essentially do the same thing that they did back in the 60s with YouTube and Netflix and the like, right? Again, the problem, while this may have an effect of boosting certain certain Canadian content that's there, it also it's kind of one thing inside it's artificial. And I think if you want to go ahead, I don't know if you want to go into the details of the actual law itself there, Carlo.
Yeah, if we want to. You want to just kind of go over the part that we have the most issue with?
Yeah, we can go into that. Like this, but the biggest problem right now is that with the Conservatives and the NDP, the Progressive Conservatives and the NDP had an issue with this bill having basically problems with, like, conflicts with Section 2B of the Charter of Rights, Rights and Freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the right to freedom of expression, right? Mm-hmm. Section 2B of the Charter, and basically we've had the Department of Justice has said that it's okay. It's okay that this is going through, but that it's okay that it's within within the Charter. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is there have if we looked at some of the policies that the Liberals have passed already, including Bill C-16, which is essentially a forced speech bill, regardless of what people might think about it, and other things like Bill C-6, the regulation that Trudeau put for values tests on charities that they had to espouse abortion. So naturally, these types of how I put it, like it's like a whole situation of cry wolf, right? He's just been. It's this people are especially on the that are not far liberal or far left are very, very suspicious and rightly so.
Yeah,
these types of policies.
Let's get into what it actually is in the meat of it, right? So, in a nutshell, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a nutshell, it's basically this act or this bill wants to bring in and rein in and net in all these content providers, all these internet content providers, and loop them into the same regulations that Bell, Rogers, and the TV cable, right? And TV cable, I guess, and radio broadcasters, the regulations and and the licensing, everything that they run. And when we mean by that is our YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, probably all these internet news content providers, right? These service providers providing a service of content and libraries and media and all this stuff. So that's what we're trying to say, right? So on one hand, as Canadians, we could say we're used to this because we went through this with TV, right? But on the other hand, we can easily say, and this is my perspective, the internet has changed everything. Everything is changed now. It's wide open. Me and you are broadcasters on one hand, right? You can be looked at just because we don't have licenses, just because, and that's good. We don't have to have a license. That's the beauty of the internet, is that it's the true free expression. Really, it is, right? And what they're trying to do is, for whatever reasons, maybe they're trying to do it because they want to make more money, or they want to bring in certain.
It's about money mostly, man.
It's mostly about money, but they can spin it as, hey, we're trying to preserve Canadian culture, right?
Yeah, and they got the heritage minister handling it.
Exactly. So that's the problem, is that it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because although you want to produce, or you want to preserve Canadian content, the funny thing is, I just read earlier today, not to go on a tangent, but without regulations, without government, leading the way, Canadian content just gets created anyway, and that's the beauty of the internet.
Yeah,
it's just wide open. You don't need the government telling you how to create or trying to mold.
No, exactly.
How to mold TVs, or the internet rather. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and there's lots of content creators who are Canadian who have come up without these government regulations.
Absolutely,
they don't need this. I mean, we don't need the government telling us what to watch and what to say, because this is essentially a segue into. The moment we get into that, it's a segue into what's happening in mainland China right now.
Exactly. Let's go into that, because one of the things that people will say was, who cares if they start taxing Netflix, right, Carlo? Or right, Des, they might say that to you. You guys don't give a shit. This bill also says, this bill stipulates that it's not going to influence individual content provider or individual content contributors, I guess, right?
Yeah, for instance, like you and I, for instance, it says it's not going to affect people like us.
But what's the definition of you or I as far as an individual? Or what if tomorrow I start considering myself a broadcaster? I have a website and I start giving out content. So, yeah.
And the thing is, what the Canadian government deems as proper Canadian content is very, very arbitrary, and it is very arbitrary. It's very subjective. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Apparently, what's his name? Scott? What's his name? If goes against the world. Scott, what's his name? There's a movie called I forgot his last name. Scott something against the world. Okay, this guy is so it's Canadian. It's a Canadian show, a Canadian actor, right? Okay. And apparently that movie is not really Canadian enough.
Okay,
but the assassination of Gandhi that's really Canadian. I mean, what? Gandhi's Indian. That's part of Indian history. How the heck is that Canadian? It's not.
It's crazy. I mean, the fact that it has to have Canadian. I mean, what's Canadian content? If I'm the creator, what we have here is Canadian content. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. And the idea of anytime you try and force, a culture to do something, or anytime you force people to try and be a certain way, that's the thing about culture, is that it's dynamic. It's a living thing. Mm-hmm. So. And what's Canadian culture? Like you said, how do you define Canadian culture?
Poutine and toux.
But the real scary part is that if you let the government have bills like this, and that bills like this passed, then definitions, the government in power, in the current definition, or the current government in power, gets to create what their definition of Canadian culture, like you said, like the Chinese government or other governments that are oppressive, really oppressive. It says, well, not only do we want you to have Canadian content on it, but now you can't have anything that's anti-government, right? You can't criticize the government. That's going to be next.
That's the next part, because if you look at this is a section of the description of the bill from the Department of Justice, and it says here under the section that says right to freedom of expression, section 2B of the Charter. Okay, so it says here, the bill is carefully. I'm going to start from the beginning of the fourth paragraph, the final paragraph of the section. It says the bill is carefully tailored to achieve these objectives. Users of social media who upload programs for sharing with other users and are not affiliated with the service provider will not be subject to regulation. So apparently we're not subject to it.
Mm-hmm.
The bill maintains the Commission's role and flexibility in determining what, if any, determining what, if any, regulatory requirements to impose on broadcasting undertakings, taking into account the Act's policy and regulatory objectives, the variety of broadcasting undertakings and the difference between them, and what is fair and equitable. So, in a nutshell, the CRTC makes the decisions on a lot of stuff. They say that we're not going to be affected, and we may not be affected directly, right? But that doesn't mean they can't affect us indirectly, right?
Well, and if they have full flexibility, right, to determine regulatory requirements in the future, that means that they're going to be able to change it and say, well, now we encompass people that have over 10,000 listeners or viewers as broad. They can change it, right? Arbitrarily.
Yeah, and the thing is, they made amendments to it already. Said just because the NDP and the progressive conservatives were saying we want guarantees on this thing for free speech, right? We want to make sure that content providers are that people like the ones who people actually create videos and etc. won't be affected by this.
Yeah.
But it is going to be affected by it in one way, shape, or form. Like for instance, if you want to watch, I think the new Superman and Lois show that's on CW there. If you want to watch that in Canada, you can't, unless you're behind a VPN that can spoof your location or your geolocation.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to actually see that. You can try, and you can't even get onto the CW website, right? Yeah. Because it's American only, right? Or it's not allowed in Canada. So same way, there's going to be other types of shows that Canadians may want to watch that we're not going to be able to see because, well, the government decides what we get to see or not, which is not really that great. I mean, imagine if people, imagine if the latest and greatest show, like let's say, I don't know, Game of Thrones, whatever, right? That was a really popular show, right? I think it's still going strong. I'll be honest, I haven't watched it. So all you Game of Thrones fans, don't get at me because I'm not into that show.
Season 3, I think.
I've not gotten into that show, but I just don't have the time. Yeah. But the thing is imagine if Canadians were not allowed to watch Game of Thrones. All of a sudden, you can't watch Game of Thrones anymore because the government says it's not Canadian enough.
See, here's my big worry though, is that stuff like that, dramas and all that stuff. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's not great. That's important too. But my big worry is news, because they're already trying to attack alternative news, right? Exactly. And so what's going to happen when they don't allow these news agencies, because now they're considered news broadcasting, right? They're not, maybe they won't fit in this loophole that me and you fit into. But if we become a daily show and we have news every single day and we start getting millions of viewers, right? Which we will. Thank you, everybody. Then what's, what's determined a broadcaster? Because there's no fees to the CRTC right now. There's no regulation, right? And if, for example, RT, right, Russia Today, and they have an RT America channel. If they're, the Rebel News, for example, Rebel News is a perfect example. They're online, Facebook, they're online, and, they criticize the government. They're very hard on the government, rightfully so. Like, everybody should criticize the government. It's our job. Something like this would definitely affect them because they're considered, some sort of a broadcaster news. So this would affect them.
And RT, I mean, already RT and those other sites like that, it's all what we considered like alternative news, that's not getting high on Google itself. It's way down. If you want to see RT, you got to go to DuckDuckGo.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's already skewed. It's already been manipulated. The internet, absolutely. Yeah.
It's already skewed on it.
Well, look at it. I mean, the internet, the online news, but in the alternative news, although it's being skewed in the internet, you can't see that it is more popular. It actually is more popular than Fox News and CNBC and all these things. So much so that even like Joe Rogan's podcast, for example, on Spotify, there's a reason why Spotify gave him $100 million, right? He's got that many viewers, more than all the news anchors or more than all those news agencies. So people are really listening to it, and the internet's the way to go, and the government is not dumb. So they're saying, how can we jump on this?
Exactly. They want to cash in on it. They want to tax it. Right.
Tax.
I mean, you think you think that Trudeau legalized marijuana because he was a good soul and he wanted to make sure that all these people didn't get into jail? No,
Yeah,
he wanted to freaking make money off of it. This is the same guy who takes bribes from China and take out of Chinese investors. He takes bribes off of what's that? What he takes gifts. He gave had that conflict of interest of the Abacan and and he's got his mom's apparently receiving benefits for handling the money for the weed charity. I mean, gotta give me a break here. Right? These guys are in there to get as much money as they can get out of the taxpayer. And the moment that they're out, they're rich and they're fine and they're set. I mean, you gotta understand what this guy used to do before he was prime minister. He was a drama teacher.
Yeah. Well, his daddy was prime minister. That's the big thing.
The best thing was his daddy was a prime minister. He's a great actor. I can tell you that much. He's a very good actor.
All of us.
Over-tongued and everything. Easily likable because he knows how to act. But the thing is, it's like you look. I mean, look at the Bible. If you look at what Jesus said about the Pharisees, it's the Pharisees, they said one thing and they did another. They were essentially what you call a stereotypical hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
White sepulchres is what he called them. And if you look at what Trudeau says and what Trudeau does, he's essentially Jesus would be screaming at the guy, calling him a white sepulchre today, right?
Yeah. Well, exactly, and it comes under the guise or the illusion of other things that they're trying to be charitable, we're trying to think about everybody's health, and we're gonna get in other episodes about the lockdown and COVID and all that stuff too, right? But this is just another thing. Like, we don't need more regulation. We don't need more nanny state, and this is something that it's slippery slope for me. I'm really worried about something like this because it's not just this. Right? It never just ends at Bill C-10. It's what happens next one, because once they establish this level of whatever they're trying to establish, right, then they can just go more. And it is going to be a matter of, what if what if me and you want to start a news agency? Not only that, what if we are critical against the government? Right now, if we are critical against the government, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? They're not going to shut us down. They're not going to, you know what I mean? And what happens?
They don't have the power to do that.
Exactly. But what happens if we then in the future? So even if individuals are safe right now, me and you, it doesn't mean individuals are safe next time, right? The next bill might say, okay, now we're going to include individuals because we realize it was so successful. Spin it to the people, all this bullshit, and the next thing you know, me and you are regulated, right? And then that's the thing, is that once you regulate it so much that people can't be dissenters or whatever, that's when you have total dictatorship, and that's what everybody's afraid of.
The government should not be involved in regulation of things like of the internet, of broadcasting and stuff like that. The government should just stick to things like infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
And basic needs for people to be able, so that the country can operate. That's all it really needs.
When are we going to get a government that wants critical thinking?
Yeah, we don't have a government that has critical thinking.
No, we don't want a government that wants to challenge things. We don't want a government that wants to debate things across the aisle and really find partisan. We don't have a government. I don't think anybody has a government like that right now, but that's really what we need, right?
And something that's going to go like completely bipartisan, not having to worry about who's trying to cut someone else in order to get whatever bag of money out, and whatever the case. That's essentially what they're doing, right? Trying to gain power or control.
And that's the whole problem with politics, is that their whole lifeline, their whole purpose is just to have their party in power for the next election, until the next election.
That's how the progressive conservatives ended up with O'Toole, because O'Toole, as his name would imply,
fitting.
Yeah, that's just a joke. Okay, so for those of you who create,
I don't know him personally.
You have to take that seriously.
Probably
but that's the thing is that's he. The thing is, you got a liberal in. I said it before. You got a liberal running the progressive conservatives, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But it is, not to defend him or anything, but we're in a place right now today where I'm a classic liberal and I'm on the blue side of the fence, right? Or I seem to be, because there's a lot of people I know, or a lot of people who just meet me today. Ricardo at 42 years old, and oh my God, this guy's pretty conservative. He's knuckle dragger. What does he lift weights? What does he like guns? Like, what do you know what I mean? Tattoos and motorcycles. But really, I'm a classic liberal like you, right?
Yeah.
And well, maybe not like you. I don't know. It's hard to define.
Well, I'm more like, I come from a conservative family. Right?
Yeah. But on the liberal side,
and I started moving more left because I started becoming more and more moderate. Because my biggest thing living in a very conservative family was I used to ask a lot of questions.
yeah, me too.
So
I got
I
slapped
was,
a lot.
and my dad did not like it.
Yeah, same family, same house.
Oh gosh, I remember talking to my dad about the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory. He's like, "Those are dangerous words, son. Those are dangerous words." I'm like, "What do you mean they're dangerous words? Come on, dad." Because he was strict creationist, right? That's it, right?
Sure. Of course.
So Book of Genesis, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
So
well, let's talk, Des, about the idea that, I mean, because we are Centerville voice, we are the moderate voice, right? The
Yeah.
left now is screaming, or the liberals are now screaming, "Hey, conservatives, you guys are just being hyperbolic. You guys are just exaggerating."
they're not.
But it's where it can go, and that's what politics is about, right? And that's where limits is about in politics, and freedoms. The reasons why our freedoms are there is because it's the limit, right? So we
Yeah.
want to chip away slowly, and something like this can actually chip away, maybe not our freedoms, but control.
And the heritage minister is going around saying that the progressive conservatives are trying to be making things bipartisan. They're the ones who are being divisive on this bill and all that stuff. You look what the liberals have been doing for the past 10 years. Of course they're going to be that way.
Yeah.
You know, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you, as the whole saying goes, right?
Yeah, well, that's the whole political game, is that they're fighting everything, right?
They're fighting everything because the thing is, there's no trust anymore. Conservatives don't trust the liberals anymore because of what they've been doing. I mean, Kathleen Wynne was probably the worst case scenario.
I gotta give Trudeau a lot of shit too, though, because he's taken with that and run.
Besides, he's taken what Wynne did and ran with it. Yeah,
yeah. Besides the scandals, he's made himself look like a buffoon, which it's embarrassing, right? I mean, he may be a good businessman, which he's not. He may be good politically, which he's not. He may be good diplomatically, which
he's not. He may be a good drama teacher, which he is.
Sure, which so could I, right?
He's a good actor.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, but the thing is, like,
oh, you should see the guy. I saw this. The guy. This guy could cry on demand.
But my point is that, like, this is another example of, like,
on command, not on demand. He could cry on command, not on demand.
But like, this is another example of the buffoonery, right? The politics has gotten to, right? Not on the same way, but in the same universe of how Trump got elected, is the same way that Trudeau is still in power. People are what's the word? Like, they're lost. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. We really don't know what's going on. We hear the conservatives are yelling, right, back and forth. Everybody's shitting on Trudeau. The people who voted for Trudeau the first time regret it. They didn't vote for him the second time, me included. But you know, they're saying, well, he's not that bad. He's not that bad. What can he do? He's, you know, it's a pandemic and all this stuff. The bottom line is that you don't need to be under scandal. That's just it. And
yeah, the thing is that if you want to look at the principles, look at what they were before the pandemic. Okay. Yeah. If you want to look, okay, Doug Ford. A lot of people complain about Doug Ford. The guy is following the experts, so-called the doctors and all that stuff. He's just following what they're saying, right? I mean, they're going to get things wrong. No, I'm not defending him. Why they voted Doug Ford in is because of Kathleen Wynne.
He messed
up. Doug Ford was one of the first things that he did was he made a policy of forcing universities to allow true free speech across the board on every single campus in Canada. Oh, sorry, not in Canada, in Ontario. Okay. Right? So, because before that, Wynne was allowing for them to kill free speech in universities and only have a left-wing bias. Okay, that was happening.
Dr. Peterson complained about
that. Yeah, that's when that's where we saw the rise of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, it blew him up for sure.
He came up during that time.
Yeah,
because he started talking sense that was lost thanks to people like Wynne, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny, and it's not to go off too far, but the conservative view or the conservative kind of mandate, or even just conservative thinking was really been demonized. Growing up, I saw it being demonized, and it was really that big push to go left. Well, you know what it is? It's these catchphrases like progressive, go left, right?
Yeah,
liberal, progressive, or progressive conservative. You know what I mean? The PC.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at word progressing, what are you progressing towards?
Well, exactly, and it's almost like they should have held on to their name conservative instead of just stay conservative.
Yeah, the problem they put progressive conservative because the Liberal Party was in power for so freaking long.
Yeah, they're
right?
pandering to the people of the party, the world, or their country. Yeah,
Yeah. So it was the longest running, most powerful party in Canada,
yeah,
and they were having a hard time competing.
exactly.
And
So
that's the problem, is that we don't, unfortunately, ever since Harper, we have not, well, Ford's okay, right? But Harper was the last real strong conservative leader we've had, right?
yeah,
Scheer could debate, but Scheer didn't have it right. Right? Scheer was like, I'm not Trudeau. I'm not Trudeau. Vote for me. I'm not Trudeau. That's
yeah.
essentially all he did. Right?
I think I found over the years that I think I like a conservative government, but I can run my house as liberal as I want. You know what I mean? And that almost defines itself as like a libertarian in my views. But I don't know. Let's go back to this. The danger again with something like this is not just necessarily like, to be honest with you, me and you may be not affected with C-10 right now, but Netflix may be affected, YouTube will be affected, all these other services will be affected. So their content may be affected. They may decide to jump ship and say we're not going to Canada, right? So all kinds of media will be affected. And then not only that, it's like, it's not maybe it won't be infringing on my free speech, but it'll be infringing on the free speech of the company that I create. Like a company doesn't get free speech, right?
Yeah,
So,
and yeah, the company doesn't get free speech, but then also that by doing that, unfortunately, that leaves a loophole, because now the government can decide what the company shows. So if the government can decide what the company shows, it'll decide, what good Canadians get shown, and all the non-Canadian stuff and all the bad Canadians don't get shown.
and that's a slippery slope, because
That's
what's
the slippery
bad Canadian today is what's good Canadian today, or compliant Canadian today may not be compliant Canadian 2 years
Oh
from now.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, when the Trudeau government's in power for 15 years, because in worst case scenario, right? There's no term limits in Canada, right?
No, there's no term limits.
I don't think people
Trudeau was
realize
in for
that.
15 years,
Yeah.
right?
How long was his dad in power?
Roughly 15 years or so.
There you go. So I'm sure he sees that in his future, but we're not going to let it happen.
Yeah. And if I'm correct, I'd have to double check on this. I believe Pierre Trudeau just stepped down.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, as far as I remember, like he was in there for a long
I think.
time. But then if you look at the guy,
Yeah.
there's certain points where he was a little bit like Trump.
Yeah.
So if you look at doing the War Measures Act with the FLQ, right? He had to do it. He did what he had to get done. So there was a reason why he was in there for so long.
Yeah.
His son, I could see him leaving. Like, he's already in a minority government.
Yeah, that's the first step to go for sure. But the problem is that they need someone strong on the conservative side, someone who's willing to take. How about that?
That's the problem. We don't have a strong leader on the conservative side.
Who's that guy with the glasses? He's very well spoken.
Olivier. Oh, that guy's good.
What's up with him?
I don't know why that guy's not the freaking prime minister or running as the conservative leader.
I think that he'd be the party leader for sure.
He should be the party leader, if anyone. The guy
likable.
slams Trudeau like nothing.
Yeah, I know. He slams him all the time. Trudeau has nothing
all
to say.
facts. The guy's
okay. Let's wrap this up, Des. How do we wrap this up? It's basically, I'm worried about the slippery slope, and I'm worried about the definitions. When definitions change, we get looped in, right?
Yeah, and honestly, again, if the last thing we want, as I said before, Trudeau's been somewhat imitating Xi Jinping from China in certain ways, right? We showed it in previous episodes, right? From the churches to for both of them, how they handle the churches, to how they try and basically try and rebrand things and redefine things, and make up their own terms to try and get out of certain scenarios. That it's just, and also to try and shut up their political opponents. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. The point that I always want to, or the point that keeps coming up in my mind again, is I don't want the government to tell me what Canadian culture is. I'm a Canadian, and I'm going to be the contributor to what Canadian culture is. And I think
No.
that's what it is today.
And yeah, even if you don't agree with us on the on the possibility that this is a slippery slope, the fact of the matter is that this still, like, I think this is going to be a slippery slope in the long run. I'm talking like 3, 4, 5, maybe like 10 years time. You're going to see the effects of that. But
this is a trend too with their government. I don't like these trends.
Yeah, that's the trend. And how it's happened, it's happened before, right? They said, the liberals say, "Oh, this is not going to happen," and then it happens. When the conservatives said, "We told you it's going to happen," and it happens all the time, and no one wants to admit to it. And but the thing is, even if you don't believe that, the truth of the matter is, if you're not really into politics and all that stuff, your favorite shows might be going bye-bye because they're from the USA.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yep. Whether they just regulate them out or whether the company decides to hightail out of there, either way.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Des, thanks so much, my brother.
Same here, bud. We'll see you guys in the next video.
All right. Peace.
Peace. Thanks for joining in and watching Centerville Voice. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you are seeing this on YouTube, make sure you click on the notifications bell so you get notified when we upload new videos, which we release every Friday. Sharing and liking our videos helps promote the channel, and sharing episodes like these helps get the word out so that more people will get to see our videos. If you like what you see and or hear, please consider becoming one of our Patreon supporters. 10% of all Patreon supporter donations we receive goes to our charity of the year. You can visit us at centervillevoice.com to learn more and engage with us on one of our social media pages. Thanks for your support, and we will see you again in our next video or podcast.